I come from a city which is Trieste, which is a port city, really north of the Adriatic Sea, so it's the northern port of the whole Mediterranean. And it's also a place, as you see from the slide on the right side, which is facing the Alps. So it's really where the Mediterranean culture and the Alpine culture meet. Is also where three cultures, let's say, goes together. So the Latin one, so the Italian one, the Slavic one, and the German one, because the border is really, three countries are really nearby. Myself, for example, Dimitri, I'm an Italian citizen. My surname is Slovene and is written in a German way, so I'm a real perfect product of this part of the world. I run an architectural office, so I'm not a designer, but I'm an architect, and we were lucky enough in this 15 years of which I run this office to have different projects, let's say very different from team and from size, so from very small to large master plans, both in Italy and abroad. But what is common to all the projects is the way we start a project. And we start a project, I never want to start to design immediately, to draw, to think about a form. I first want to know the clients, the people who are coming to my office and ask me to do something. So I want them to talk. We want to be, I'm not saying friends, but to get to know each other. I like to unveil people to unveil to me their dreams and sometimes also their fears. So I write things down, and then I can start to think who you are and what is the right project for you, what I think is the right project for you. So working as an architect is interesting if you can bring an added value. And I think to build stories out of project, not only technical shelter, let's say, of an activity, but to bring stories, this is the added value. So we build a narrative, and being myself an architect, I build it, of course, through space, light, and materiality, not through words. So first story, come from Italy. We drink our coffee espresso, which is very short, it's very strong, and the people during the day drink 5-6 times, goes to the cafe, to the bar, enter the bar, mostly they don't sit down, they go to the counter, drink the coffee, 1.5 minutes, and off you go, you're out, €1, and off you go. So this is the smallest project I ever built, actually. It's 25 square meters, it's a real tiny little bar in a cultural center. We were left only with this small room in an existing building. And the commissioner, the client, told me, okay, but what can we do with it? It's too small, is it too small? And this lies between the street, which runs on the bottom, and the courtyard, which runs on the top. And I say, okay, first thing I want to do is to make the space bigger, so to dilate it, to make it bigger. And then I thought, okay, what is the most, the first thing you look and the things which mostly attract you when you go into the bar in the Italian way, so you go and drink your espresso. So it's the counter, the bar counter. No? So I picked the element of the bar counter and I dilated it through the space. So I designed it and stretched it, literally opened the space. So it went on top, it went out on the courtyard, and on the lower part, it went down on the street. So in this way. So in this way, visually or psychologically, the space looks bigger because you're immediately attracted when you come out from the center to this cantilevered part on the right side of the picture on the right side, and you immediately go there. And when you walk on the street, you have this effect, let's say, which is particularly interesting at night because you don't need a sign. This bar does not need a sign. It's not called Café Trieste or Bar Metz, I don't know. It's called, it's a cafe because you immediately see what you're going to have. You see the coffee cups and you immediately understand that this is a place where you go. And later, this story developed. Of course, this bar here got the nickname Cubic because it's a cube. I didn't give it myself, but people started to give it. And later on, I met a person which runs a plant where they're roasting coffee. So they're not producing their own brand of coffee, but they're buying from the gross company's coffee. They roast it and then they give it to the company which sells it. And he said, oh, I really like your bar. We have to sit down together and you should help me to design my new brand of coffee because I want to go out with my coffee. I say, okay, it's nice. It's not what we are doing normally, packaging things like this, but we say, okay, let's do it. And being an architect, of course, I think about very simple forms. So the square, which gives somehow stability, and the circle, which gives dynamicity, let's say, of the form. And realize then that if you look at the bottom picture, the one on the left, it looks like a coffee cup from the top. And he said, can I use your name? Can I use the name of the bar you designed to make to give it to our product? And say, it's fine, of course, let's do it. No? And it becomes instead of the K, it becomes the Q, so it became cubic. And this is the way we started to be even closer. And then he said, okay, I want to have some concept bars through the region, so to act as a bar, but also to promote my brand, my new brand of coffee. You know? And that's how we designed it. And this is, for example, in a multiplex cinema. And what it stays, of course, is the counter, which is cantilevered, which is clearly cubic with the lantern at the end of the counter. And then we started to introduce, in this case, also the elements, the shelves to display the products. Another story, because I say these projects are stories, it's, let's say we can call it goods from the world. As I say, Trieste is a port city, and the old ports were working somehow in this way. No? Goods were coming with the boat, with the ship, large ships. They were stored in large places, and then they went with other means into the territory. They were distributed into the territory. So you had, this is 50 years ago, of course, you had this kind of situation, piles and piles and piles and piles of goods. And this is again a little bit a coffee story, because Cogeco is a company which acts as an intermediate in the coffee trade. 5% of the whole world coffee goes through the port of Trieste, so it's important also for this trade. They buy coffee through the whole world. It was coffee from the plantation, mostly in the equatorial area, but through the whole world. They do some tests, and then they sell it to the guy like the one before, so the roasting plants. So I sit down with them, and I told them, I want to know what are you doing, who you are, what is the specialty of your company. And the specialty basically come out that there are two. One is that they have international global relation through the whole world, so the whole world, international relation to the whole world. And the second, they do this specific test, there are 9 tests, size, smell, they try to roast it, of course, they test it, etc., the different type of coffee. And so they have a very, very specific knowledge. And this very specific knowledge, to me, these two things ended up in having this entrance wall in the company, Siege. This was the restoration of existing building, where when you enter, you're faced with a chemical formula. This is a chemistry, of course. Everybody knows chemistry from high school. Nobody knows, of course, that this is the chemical formula of caffeine, but since you enter this company, you should suppose that it's something to do with coffee. And the rest is this very abstract map of the world. You say, where is the map of the world? Is this only the horizontals? I took out the verticals. And instead of the names of the countries, they are the names of the copies. So Ethiopia Sidamo, Guatemala Pastores, Colombia Suprema, all of these names which are incredibly exotic only if you name it. No? If you say, okay, wow, I'm already traveling, I'm already on holiday. And the specific knowledge on top. So this was a little bit the process, which gives a specific identity of the company. So you know that you are entering a company which has a dealing worldwide, and on the other hand, which has a specific knowledge. The other part, for example, when we intervened was the laboratory. How does it work? They get samples before buying, of course, packages, tons of coffee. They get samples in small bags. They do this test, and then they sell it. And when I arrived there with the old Siege, let's say how it was organized, all of these bags were stored in a place where nobody could see it. And also the table where they were testing coffee, doing testing, was kind of hidden. It was something, I said, no, you should show this because this is your gold. This is your knowledge. This is what you're doing. So let's put, for example, all the bags on a shelf. And since these bags are coming in every week, so they change it, we designed these small magnets, which here you have some samples of with the names of the coffee. So this thing is also changing all the time through the shelves. On the other hand, we placed this 5 meters wide large map, this good homologine projection of the world, so the map. And I don't know if you see it because there's maybe too much light into the room, but there are also names of the coffee exactly placed where they come from. So when you get a host, when you have someone coming to the laboratory here, you can also explain to him exactly where this coffee can, the Guatemala Pastores, where is it, or the Ethiopia Sidiamo, where is it on the world. And another thing is also the tasting of the coffee, because these guys, they do tasting like 30 coffees per day. Of course, you cannot drink all of them because it's not good for your health. It's too much. So they have to spit them. No? So instead of having something which you hide it in a brutal way, let's say, we thought of doing this in a bit more elegant way by having this shelf, let's say, which pull out of the table. And it's something a little bit like going to the dentist if you want. You hide it into the room. Then we did some library buildings. This one is a particular one because it's a media library which is dedicated to the promotion of the cinema culture, so the film. It's a situation in a small city called Gorizia, north of Trieste. Very particular situation because you have in one building in the historical center, because we are between the castle, the hill of the castle, and the main square. And you have there a small multiplex, which is Cinema d'Essai, let's say. Then you have a siege of several associations which are devoted to the promotion of the culture of cinema. They host also a prize every year, a film festival. There is the art university to study cinema, and finally also the media library, which specialized in books and films, of course, about cinema culture. So we did this intervention also on the outside, on the facade. On top you have the multiplex, so a place which does not need windows. So we place these glass panels which reflects, which you see on the previous slide, they say reflects the greenery of the castle hill on its own. So it absorbs and it reflects it. And on the other side it reflects, we see for example this is the main square with the church there at the end, the city. And when you enter a space which is very compressed. It's only 2.70 meters. So again, dilating the space through the use of this finishing, both of floor and the ceiling. And then we place all the bookshelves, on the perimeter, and we place the reading elements, the activity elements in the middle. These shelves then, when they meet the facade, like in this case here, they became a kind of vitrine which are displayed for students to show what they are doing, let's say, to the city, so to the street. Or they became elements where you have a video corner or a study room. Then we did also some exhibition design. We were fortunate enough to do some exhibition in a beautiful place, which I will show you now. Historical exhibition of the history of Trieste, of the city. And particularly here I'm going to talk about an exhibition which talks about the history of the city through the First World War. It's not only a city, Trieste is not a city which only was involved into the war, but actually it was a city, one of the arguments, let's say, for starting the war was also the conquest of the city, because it has been for 650 years under the Habsburg, so Austrian Empire. It has the biggest flourishing of the city, economically also, was during the Austrian period. You can imagine that in year 1900, among the 10 listed companies, which were sailing companies, which had the most traffic in the world, there were 2 from the city of Trieste, because it was the port of the Austrian Empire, which was a superpower at the time. Nowadays, of course, Austria is a small country, but the situation was very tense because the majority of the population was Italian, but you had 10 nationalities in the city. And economically, it was clear that the city was owning a lot to the Austrian government. So after the war, which with Italy won and Austria lost, of course, Austrian-Hungarian Empire lost, the city became, from being the first and only port of a superpower, turned out to be one of the 20 ports of a country which only has coast, basically. So it lost completely interest, it lost population economically. less, all the statistics you read is less marriages, less birth, less everything. So the situation was very tense. I said we were fortunate enough to design this exhibition in this place, which it was built in the first year of 1900 as a fish market. Can you imagine? It looks almost like a cathedral, and it was a fish market. So to show you also how much economical development was in the city 100 years ago for Trieste. We decided to design this, to talk about this instability after talking with the curators and the historian, which of course thought about this exhibition through, and they wanted to talk about the life of people, not only historical events, and they wanted this concept of instability to be expressed somehow through the insertion of these circular elements, which are displayed in various types of things, of course. Because in a way the circle is a very strong, compact geometrical form, but on the other hand is kind of unstable, and we like to place these circles into this incredible volume of this former fish market in a way that it looks like they're somehow moving, and you don't have even a linear way of moving into the space, because we didn't want this, or the curator didn't want this. This is the organization, so you see different type of circles running around the columns of the former fish market, and they are displaying various type of elements, so a fish or objects or whatever was needed to display. Having a particular effect also at night, because luckily the exhibition was open at night, so it was kind of interesting to see it also during nighttime. And then we had two installations, basically, specific installation. One, you see that there are some big letters on the wall. On the perimeter, what we did, we extracted from the letters which the soldiers were sending to the back home. And they were just saying, basically, hey, tomorrow I'm going to the battlefield and I'm going to die. So they were very crude, direct letters. So we wanted to express this. And every letter has a height of a person, so it's 1.70 meters. So every single letter there is a person which says, hey, this matter is very serious somehow. And then the second installation is this circle in the middle. And these letters which we read, taking over, of course, these two phrases which we put on the perimeter, then we hang them there in the middle, right on top. And this becomes the cloud of memories, let's say, which express this very position of the people, not only of the commandant-in-chief, so not of the generals, let's say, but of the soldiers, the normal soldiers which went to the battlefield. This is a competition result of a competition we did in a completely different culture in Iran, which we were lucky enough to win it. The task was here to design a gate facility, so an entrance, a small building to a luxury villa development. It's in the Mazandaran province, which is north of Tehran, which is, of course, the capital. 10 million people, and all the important things are there. And it's like 2.5 hours drive north, so you come to the Caspian Sea, and it's a kind of also place where people from Tehran go for holidays. We didn't want this gate facility to be a limit necessarily, so to be something which says, I am here and you are there, I am rich and you are poor. We wanted to start to understand what is important in this Persian culture, but generally, the moment of greeting people when they leave home and back when they come back home in the evening. So this is very important. So we started first to look at the gates in Iran. So what does it mean to enter a place? And we see that there is always this very formal moment when you enter a place. And also we see that the decoration is based on this multiplication of one element. So it's one very nicely designed element which has a significance, of course, which then is multiplied and becomes 100 of it. And we look also at the specific local culture, carpets. You usually know Persian carpets with very elaborated motifs, but in this province they have carpets with very simple geometric elements, which we like very much. So we wanted to use this thing as well, the simplicity and beauty of these local carpets. So this was then the result, 2 gates, one for enter, one for exit, as it was prescribed by the competition brief. And it's very simple because it's one gesture which welcomes you when you come back, like the one on the left, and one is the opposite movement when you leave the place and you go to work in the morning. It's made with concrete columns, let's say, concrete columns which are prefabricated, which contain lights into it, and this on top are corten steel pails, so corrugated steel pails, which are, every one is tilted from the other, and as you see, it has also some decoration into it. And for the process of decoration, which was for us a very free, let's say, interpretation of what is their local decoration elements, we took a grid, so we inserted an element from the traditional motif, let's say, and then in a very free way, we started a process of subtraction and addition, so to have this final effect, which is particularly also effective also at night time because of the illumination, but it's of course kind of nice because of the gesture, also when you enter during daytime. Okay, completely different story. A sport facility which we did in Ronchi, which is basically where the Trieste airport is. Again, this was a competition which we won. This is a small place, it's like 12,000 inhabitants. It has a center which is not usually in Italy. You have the center is a small square with a church and I don't know, some public building, etc. In this case, the center is a green area, a circular green area with some sport facilities and 3 schools basically in the middle and a park. The only thing that when they built this covered skating ring and the sport hall on the back, they didn't make any connection with the 2 facilities, very stupid of course, and they had very, very, I'm not saying basic, it was less than basic facilities for changing room. So the task was here to build some changing room and basically a door to connect these 2 parts. What we proposed is to make also a cantilevered space to cover this physical gap between these areas, which means also that when you go from the skating ring to the changing room, you go in a covered area so you don't get wet, basically. And it also serves as a connecting element from the park to the schools. So it's also a place where youngsters gather, let's say. And looking at this previous picture here, what is interesting when you go and you look at these skaters, these young skaters, mostly are kids, also very small like that one there on the bottom, they dance basically. It's like they have an incredible grace, they dance in the air, it's very beautiful. So what we wanted to do here is not only a facility which fulfills the requirement, of course, to change yourself, to have a shower, etc., but we wanted to have a scenographical setting of it. So the scenographical setting means that this is like something which could basically add something to the beauty of these kids which are dancing on the skating ring. Apparently, we succeeded because, for example, they use this space also to do some, a fashion magazine use it to do some catwalk. So it's like with no budget, basically, because building this was like very, very difficult with a very limited budget, which often, unfortunately, in Italy, we have with public buildings like this. Other stories. Through whole Europe, we have industrial buildings which are not in use anymore. Former industrial buildings, which some of them are beautiful, some of them are not beautiful, or they are really ugly. But our whole culture in Europe is left with this dilemma, what to do with this building. No? Because on one side, they're not served as industrial purpose anymore. On the other hand, of course, it will make sense to tear them down. And there is one more layer which says that we are somehow linked to this thing, and we don't want to give them away. So we don't want to lose them because they signify something for our previous culture. So what to do with this? This was again a competition in Bolzano, so it's an alpine city, where they have these hydropower buildings and they wanted to convert it into something else. And this something else is like spaces for youngsters, for co-working, for spaces for startup, media library, for exhibition. So a little bit of everything, and plus new offices nearby. So you see on the bottom you have 3 existing buildings on the bottom, which should be converted, and then some new development which is a bit more questionable if it will take place or not. So this is the existing buildings. You see they look like this. So empty with a structure, but still they have this beautiful attraction of being, to have this high space, these places where you can imagine, basically you can do basically anything. So what we propose is to organize, of course, several elements, several spaces into it, a lot of communal spaces, because what is important into this kind of hubs, let's say, is that you have interaction with other people, you have to meet them. You're not only doing your job, let's say, but it's very important that you act with other people, you talk with them, because sometimes ideas and opportunities, they are born in this very way. Of course, we propose to insert also some specific element which will be also a little bit iconic, like staircase and this, or to use, for example, in difficult situation, to use, for example, the chimney, which you see in the middle there in the section, which could become a source of light for the spaces, for the working spaces into the buildings. And then, of course, there is also this new development with offices into the green area. All the parkings are underneath, so you don't see cars, basically. You see only this green field, and also larger development here. Always in the same city, this was again a competition for designing a master plan for the extension of the city of Bolzano with 1,000 new apartments, so it's very large. Bolzano has 100,000 people, so you add basically 4,000, almost 4,000 inhabitants to it. And again, we started to look what is interesting, what is particular, what is specific for the city of Bolzano. You are in the middle of the Alps, so you are at the bottom of the valley. And as you see on the slide on the right side there, on the picture on the right side, every single square meter of the bottom of the valley is used. Is used for transportation, is used for building, is used for agriculture and for industry. Why? Because once you go out of the valley, you have mountains, and on the mountains it's very difficult to do anything. Basically, they go steep up, you see, and you don't do anything. So what we've seen is that traditionally you had several buildings of different types, directly related and mixed to the landscape, and also you have this type of a very specific type, which is the castle. Castle is like 4 buildings, basically built around a courtyard, and having at very odd angles sometimes, and having a very dominant position also in the territory. So when we were asked to build this extension, which you see there is almost finished, we decided to build the Casanova. Casanova is not, of course, referring to the famous Italian lover, but to the fact that this is new house, let's say, there. We decided to build it nine type of new castles into it. So the concept is basically this landscape plus castle will give this Casanova new castle into the Alps in this area, which is here in the bottom, before our intervention. Each castle is designed with its own shape, so it has its own identity. But one other thing, for example, which comes out interesting out from this is that you very seldom have one facade parallel to the other, which is a matter of privacy. You don't see each other into the face, let's say, from one window to the other. And you also get these leftover green spaces, which we call green rooms, there in the middle. And these green rooms, they are planted each with they will be planted each with different fruit tree, which will give also a specific characteristic to all of these gardens. And another important thing is how do you build every single building there. So each of the castle is dramatically tilted from north to south, so you go from 9 floors to 3 floors, something like this. Why? Because in this way, of course, you get a specific identity, but also is a matter of sustainability. Because through the Alps, in the winter, of course, the sun is a very scarce resource because it hides behind the peak of the mountains very fast. So if you turn it, let's say, tilt it toward the south, of course, it will penetrate at the very last moment inside the courtyard. And in the summertime, it happens the opposite. So in summertime, it's very hot because there is basically no air at the bottom of the valley. And we learned from our environmental engineer that you have the only wind which blows through the area comes again from the south. And when the wind encounters an obstacle, if it's let's say up till 10 meters high, you have a blanket effect, so it stays there. And if you have a higher obstacle, then it disperses and then recomposes again. So having 2 floors at the end, it means that basically you have 7 meters, so it gets trapped into the courtyard, and you have basically natural ventilation for free, air conditioning for free during summer. Another thing, another result from tilting these buildings dramatically is that you can always look outside towards the landscape, no? And the mountains for people from Bolzano is like for us from Trieste, the sea. You need to see the mountains, we need to see the sea. It's something you have inside your DNA, let's say. Okay, towards the end, this is how do you make in an even larger master plan. This is a project we were commissioned in China, in Shanghai. How do you make a really new city from scratch? Because you know, you're talking about China, large development, everybody knows everything is happening in China. Things are happening so fast that you have this instant city growing basically in no time. But how can you make a new community basically when the whole process is going so fast? I like this picture from the American artist Jim Donovan because it makes these happenings where it places these long tables, let's say, and it's basically a lunch or a dinner, a happening where people which don't know each other, they're invited to go there. When you enter the row, you're given a plate and a knife and a fork, and you just sit there, and you sit there close to someone else which you don't know, and that's the moment, really moment, when you create a community. You create a moment where a community is basically built. Shanghai, it's the largest municipality in the world. It's 24.5 million residents, fixed resident, permanent resident, in a territory of 6,300 square kilometers. I read that Lorraine has 6,250 square kilometers, so it's the same size. Only that Lorraine has 1.1 million inhabitants, of course, so just to give you a comparison. And this thing is happening so fast that probably the number of inhabitants for Shanghai, of course, will increase very, very fast. You have also areas which are incredibly crowded. This is a model which they have in the Urban Planning Museum in the middle of the city, which is the center of the Shanghai, which is very crowded, and other areas which are less crowded, less densified, let's say. We have this, to design this area of 1 square kilometer, which is enormous. And we propose, of course, everything. I'm going to talk now not about the whole project, but only about the communal area and how did we design it. So not about housing and offices, but about the green strip, green park, sport facilities, and multi-religious center, which we were asked to do. So we try to find what is the condition which we can use from the context. Shanghai literally means on the sea, by the sea, on the water. So it means really that is the end of the big river, which ends finally in the Chinese Sea. We learned from the website of the municipality that 13% of the territory, so 13% of this 6,300 square kilometers is water. And if you zoom into the Shanghai district, which is one of the 17 districts which is divided the territory of Shanghai, it has a network of 2,000 kilometers of canals. Now, 2,000 kilometers is from Metz till Helsinki or to Istanbul, so it's a huge development. So we decided that water is going to be one of our elements which we're going to use for the designing this area. And water has been a very important source for the local culture. This picture was taken in the Museum of Jiading for food, basically, for production. This is the rice paddies, let's say. It has been a mean of transportation in this area. And people are simply used to it. And it's also very beautiful because it creates a very beautiful landscape, urban landscape into this area. So talking only about the central part, let's say, which is this green and blue park, which how we call it, which is this strip which stretches through 1.6 kilometer length. We wanted to do something which is related to the context as described before, because here is really impossible to meet the client, let's say, because you're going to have, in this area, which is 1 square kilometer, it's basically impossible. You don't know the people. You will never meet the people. We have seen that Jiading has already a very much developed green park system, which is very beautiful actually, at very high standards as you see it, so nothing to envy to any European city, for example. And what we wanted to do is to add to this knowledge which they already have, a structure. So a structure which is a pedestrian one and for bicycles, so like seen in Auckland here on the first picture, and a structure which is visible, so a row of trees, which could be poplar trees, for example, or any other kind of trees, which stretches to this length of 1.6 kilometers. And inside the park, design a series of pockets of different type of garden, which could be modern type, of classic type, it doesn't matter really. So the technique was this, to build to enlarge the existing canal there, to dig it far wider, to take this, to stretch these two rows, one of trees and one of connection, to have cross connection connecting residential areas on the bottom and on the top. And then by a simple tilt of more or less 45 degrees, then this becomes much more open, let's say, you get some pockets, some areas which can be used for activities. And then on top of it, we added still one more thing, which is these floating pavilions, let's say, in the water. So this is the result. The design is this, basically, a zigzag element, which has a bicycle pad and, of course, for pedestrian, a series of pockets with different activities, and a lot of water, of course, on top and on the bottom of the floor plan here, which is designed. This is a slow pace, let's say. You go very slowly here, but you go mostly also for doing some activities, to relax, to do things, to meet people, to meet other people, and to do some activities, which could be sport, it could be relaxing, could be dedicated to your religion moment, etc. So if we zoom in, if we plan in, like with the drone, let's say, we will see like we see the tree structure, and you see the connecting element with zigzags through, and you see also the green pockets. For example, this we call it the concrete diamond park, which is built, of course, with these concrete elements and with these colored pour concrete floor areas, or with some parasol. We have all of us have this image of the Chinese people and Japanese people with the umbrellas, because they protect themselves from the sun. They never take a suntan, for example. It could be a more classical, let's say, type of garden, as you see there at the bottom of the picture. Or it could be a sport field connected into it, inserted into it, an open area sport field. And then we have these pavilions, which could be like an art gallery or a cafe or a place where you can watch around, let's say, so a building. It could be a covered area, let's say, and we, of course, we use our buildings from before as well, like this is from the Iranian project. Because you have in the evening, you have all the people doing this, or in the morning, you have people doing this Tai Chi, the dances, they meet. So this is the piece. These are places specifically designed for them. Or you have places for meditation, let's say, on your own. So isolated, let's say, a little bit isolated into the nature. Then a part of the development of this park area was the Green Slope Sports Center. So we thought of taking this part of this ground which we digged to build, to enlarge the canal, and to put it here and to create basically an artificial pyramid or hill, let's say, because we wanted to have some sport facilities, indoor sport facilities, let's say a swimming pool, indoor and outdoor swimming pool, gym, and Chinese people like to play badminton, for example, not tennis, but badminton, so some badminton fields here. And we didn't want this to appear as a building, but more like a natural hill, let's say, connected into it. So on one side, it will be a place where you climb on top, and on the other side, on the street, it looks actually like a building, it will look like a building. And you go there for these different activities, so relaxing, gathering with friends, you can do outdoor bathing, for example, or gardening, why not? Looking something like this at the end. So you have like a artificial hill, clearly artificial, let's say. You have flowers on top, because what we wanted to do is also this, to have these pockets of flowers, so this grid with flowers, a place where you can sit and watch other people, for example, doing a concert or something, because the activity could be this, for example, gardening, and we proposed them to invent something like the yearly flower neighborhood competition. So every kind of block could apply to have one of these pockets of green. And then at the end of the year, or I don't know, several times in the year, they could decide who won the competition, who has the nicest flower. And this is also where you create a community, I think. Or of course you can have Sunday concerts, evening dances, etc., children performances. And this park then ended up in the ends up in another part, which is called the multi-religious center. This particular part of Shanghai, Jiading, is home of many foreign companies, like BMW is here, Volkswagen, Roshan, etc. So there is a foreign community. So they are used also to people which have different religion. So they ask, can we put together a center where we have Buddhist and Catholic and Protestant churches together? And of course, we started to look how these religious areas are developed in Shanghai. We see that there are always group of buildings. Many times they are also connected to water, so with pavilions directly facing the water. And we've seen also that the Catholic community, for example, is grounded in Jiading area already since 120 years, because this little picture there is taken in the Jiading City Museum, where this maquette is from the first Catholic church built there over 100 years ago. Then we look at what do they do people into this religious area. They go for religious purposes, but they go also for fun, let's say, to meet there, they eat, they go for tourism, let's say. So it's a little bit different concept from the one we have here for churches, etc. And then we say, okay, how can we put these three things together? Because it's a very delicate matter, of course. We have them together, no? The Buddhist, the Catholic, and the Protestant, but you should also show some respect. So we use again the water, because water is somehow allowing you to be close to each other, but also to show some distance. The right distance, of course, to not interfere in the process, in the religious process, in the religious activity of the other. And plus, we added other small islands dedicated to the activity, so selling food, selling gifts, memories, let's say, which is what is happening already in the religious area in China. Having this end result, let's say, which you see here. So you see the Buddhist area, which of course is biggest because there are more Chinese here than any other. And then you see the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, and the other island, which are connected by these Chinese-style bridges, so zigzag, because in Chinese culture you never go directly from one point to another. You always go in a zigzag way. You know, who has been to China knows this, of course. You never even talk directly, so there's always kind of big curves to arrive to the point. But this is how it works. It's like this. Okay, the really last project, then I'm at the end. It's a little bit of a joke and a little bit not. It's the most serious project I ever did. I'm teaching also at the Trieste Faculty of Architecture. But I will find it even more interesting now to actually have to deal with little kids, because they are so tenacious that they never give up. You tell them not to do one thing, they always have a plan B and they will do it. It's like, I want it, I do it. This picture is a little bit of a joke. It's like a turtle which was used to go to the pond, and one day she found a fence and she said, okay, forget it, I'm going to the pond anyway. So I'm just going to cross. This is my daughter, of course. Who else could it be? She visits me to the office, of course, and once we got this big box, which was very solid, and she decided that this is going to be her house. No? This box is going to be her house, and there was no way to tell her that, okay, we're going to make another house, we're going to buy a house. No, I want this. Okay. And then we brought this to my home, and but didn't want to design something, didn't want to have a beautiful house which you find in the shops or on the internet. So we started, she is collecting actually, because she's making a lot of things with cardboard rolls, no? Like we have for the plotting or the toilet rolls, things like this. Or, and we said we're going just to build it, and this is what it ended up to be. So a place where you have first interaction with space, with light. She enters there and hides in. Okay, she's now a little bit grown up now. Because this is a little bit also the role of an architect, I think, to try to bring added value to a project, but also try to make people's lives better. So, and I hope that I'm doing this, and certainly I'm doing for my daughter, of course. Okay, thank you very much.
One question about the Shanghai project.
Yeah.
This is what you did with your team, the whole city?
It's 1 square kilometer. So it's
Yes, you did that. Okay, which was so amazing. So I said, how many people worked on that?
Well, we were 12 in a ridiculous time of 2 months.
To do all that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because also another characteristic, as you know better than me, of Chinese people is to rush, 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 and then of course there was never such a hurry in reality. Also the way that they use this master plan is quite interesting. The way that they build the cities is interesting. I don't know if it's interesting now for the audience, but it's like the whole ground is public. There is no private ground in Shanghai in these areas. So you get a lease for the 40, 50 or 70 years, depends if it's industrial till residential. And the city builds, the public zone builds first all infrastructures, so the streets, the schools, the parks, etc., which owning the land, of course, is very easy. They do these perfect rectangles because, of course, they are the owners. They decide everything. It's a very much pyramid, let's say, structure. And then they need a kind of eye-catching plan to sell the ground, of course, to the private enterprises. And when they get the money, they pay back the loans to the banks for the works they did. No? So it's interesting because this master plan was commissioned to us by a public authority, but for the Chinese law, let's say, for the certain process, it does not have, as in Europe has, a kind of closed law situation. So it can be changed almost freely by the new person which bought the loan for the area. So it's very complicated process, which will...
My second question.
Yeah.
You presented a co-working area.
Yeah.
Yes, a moment. How did you proceed when you worked on that? Did you question the people a lot? Did you work with teams of people who were not professionals, but just interested in the idea of a co-working area? Unfortunately
not, because the province here wants to renovate this building in order to attract people, but they don't have a list, let's say, of people already, of companies coming in. They want to do this as an element of bringing people, new people in. So, no, the answer is no, unfortunately, because I think it will be interesting to get to know, because there also we discussed earlier, no? It's like to find the balance for co-working areas between open space and not open space, where do you meet? I think it's very important to have a lot of communal areas, a lot of people, of areas which the use of it cannot be predicted in advance. You need space which can be colonized by people freely, somehow, or freely, can be somehow directed, but you need to allow, and this is more and more in any kind of program, but in this kind of program, of course, is very important, you need to allow future users to use the space in a way freely, not to say, okay, here you're going to do this, and there you're going to do that. Of course, you need some spaces which are with names on it, but others which are kind of blurred. Thank you.